This is the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. The Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. With Stuart Cameron and Dale Clancy.
Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. And once again, the three unbeaten teams from last week in the National Leagues remain unbeaten, although Garnock from National 4 just fell short of getting that try bonus point for the first time this season. But Ayr and Orkney both posted wins in their divisions. Well, joining me as usual is Dale Clancy. We'll start as always with a look at the Premiership games from last weekend, starting with Currie 52, Musselburgh 10, Edinburgh Accies 17, Heriot's Blues 31, Jedforest 12, Selkirk 33, Kelso 20, Hawick 28 and Marr 31, Glasgow Hawks 14. So how do those results affect the table? Well, let's have a look. Hawick at the top, 51 points. Marr second, 47. Currie third, 42. Edinburgh Accies back into fourth position, 36 for them. Heriot's Blues in fifth, 34. Musselburgh in sixth, also on 34. Kelso seventh with 30. Selkirk eighth on 25. Glasgow Hawks ninth on 22. And Jedforest at the bottom with just 3 points. So Hawick have a 4-point lead still over Marr. Nothing much has changed really with the usual suspects in the top three, as all of them won with a bonus point. Heriot's Blues rise above Musselburgh into the top half, and Selkirk go above Hawks into 8th.
Yeah, I think obviously Hawick have quite a comfortable cushion at the top, and I think if you take away bonus points from it, Hawick have been in really good form since that defeat against Marr away from home. So, they've been able to go on a run which some of the other teams have not been able to build upon. But obviously you look at the results there, and Currie have put in a good performance, a great reaction after a difficult few weeks to brush aside Musselburgh. But then perhaps one of the games in there which was paramount for one of the teams to win was the other Edinburgh derby in there. Edinburgh Accies getting beat at home against Heriot's Blues is a huge game in that race for the top four, because, as you mentioned before, like those three places at the top of the table, few would bet against it. It's going to be Hawick, Marr and Currie in some sort of way, shape or form in the playoffs. But that other one's still open for any of those clubs to grab, and you look at the teams that are in the mix for that. Edinburgh Accies obviously in fourth place just now, but you go all the way down to Kelso, who realistically can still have a shout in the race for the top four.
So what have we learned from those results? Well, I'll tell you what we have learned. Musselburgh really don't like playing Currie. 46-7 at Stoneyhill, 52-10 at Millennium Park.
Yeah, I think, sometimes you just get teams that perhaps, some other teams like playing against, and Currie and Musselburgh, from a Currie point of view, they certainly like playing against their capital, rivals. And that's two big wins, two big performances, and it takes the wind out of Musselburgh's sails a little bit. But, we've talked about it time and time again on this podcast, and the Premiership is really competitive. I think there's obviously a difference between, I would say at the moment, between Hawick and Marr. Currie haven't found the consistency yet, but, they've been defeated 3 times. It's similar to Marr as well, but, those are probably the 3 strongest teams. Everybody else, they show how competitive this division is, but Musselburgh now have to react and get back on this weekend and try and pick up a win, because, as I say, that 4th spot's still up for grabs.
So let's have a look at this week then. Glasgow Hawks host Kelso, and we can hear from both sides now. Neil Hinnigan, Director of Rugby at Kelso, and first head coach at Hawks, it's Andy Hill.
It was obviously a disappointing result v Marr last week. We went down there with intentions of turning them over at Fullerton for the first time since this new Premiership began, but it wasn't to be. I'm always a coach who believes in the guys that we've got, and I always believe we'll go into any game that we can win, and I believed that last week. However, I was aware it was going to take an absolute monumental shift, considering everything that had went on through the week. We'd lost a lot of senior players through injury last week. Even guys that we were hoping would step up were unavailable for a lot of the week or not making the game because they had other availability, or Max Crumlish calling off sick on the Friday. With no hookers left other than Aaron Burgess, who had to go off at half time. We'd taken the gamble of working with Craig Nolan on the Thursday night to throw in for the first time, and that didn't pay off with Aaron obviously going off at half time. Tion Wright wasn't well at the start of the week and came in and he had to call the line out, and he's probably our 4th or 5th choice line out caller within the squad, and he did a good job there, but he's obviously not he's accustomed to, and the lack of continuity there with hookers and guys in different positions made things very difficult. And then throw into the mix that some guys are coming back in from the future squad that were on long-term injury cover, guys joining us from Super 6 who were with us last year, like Hugh Muirhead for the kind of run in, and then guys making their first start in the Premiership, or first start for the club, or first start for a long while, like Siona Halafihi. So it was really difficult, but at the end of the day, all clubs are going through this at the same time, but it just kind of adds on to the fact that, you know, as a coaching team, that we need to try and get the boys in the right mindset. We need to try and make sure we give them a game plan, that those 15 guys and 5 guys on the bench can come in and have a realistic chance of winning, and we probably didn't prepare them well enough for that last week. Things were good a bit last week was we probably got back to a bit of our identity, what had been the last few years, which we were being like a real physical pack. We defended for 15 solid straight minutes probably against Marr, and it took them 15 minutes to get through, and the effort from the boys, not just in that 15 minutes but throughout the game, was absolutely huge, and it was back to probably our physical best, what I'd been hoping for. But it just highlighted some of the things that we obviously need to get right. We need to get game management right. We can't ask us to defend for 15 minutes in a row and expect a quality outfit like Marr not to score. We have to be obviously get a set piece obviously absolutely nailed in scrum and line out, and obviously that their challenges have highlighted, but still there can be no excuses round about that. And then the discipline part, we probably let ourselves down just in a couple of real key points, and it wasn't going fishing at a breakdown. It was discipline errors that were real criminal ones, that it's just foul play, and it's an obvious one to the ref, and it's an easy penalty given. It just put us under more pressure, getting the ball back and giving a penalty away, and then allowing Marr and Maul where they managed to score from. So that was really difficult, but we just need to look forward to this week, and some positives that we've got. Paul Cairncross is hopefully going to make it if he gets through training tomorrow night. Lewis Stewart's available. Max Crumlish trained last week after obviously not being well, and Andrew Symes is back as well after his concussion to try and help add quality in that line out. And then added to that, we've got Eric Davey and Harry Proven. Eric's coming in from the Stirling Wolves, and Harry Proven's available from school, and he's, as I said, highlighted before, he's a real quality player. And then even amongst all of that, Stephen Leckie's been back and been training this week after damaging his rib against Selkirk the other week, so him being actually a bit about the squad is a massive help to the boys. All the games we've been involved in so far have generally been really quite tight affairs, and the Kelso have probably given us our most comprehensive defeat in terms of that. We maybe took them a bit for granted in terms of as the players, guys were shell-shocked from the warm-up on, just really struggled to get any momentum going. And then Kelso were dead simple in what they did. They were very direct. They had a real good game plan just to target us and make things really difficult. And when you've got the likes of Bruce McNeil on the charge, and the team kind of really epitomises what he's all about, confrontational, getting in guys' faces, and then you've got somebody like Andy Tate directing traffic. They become a really good outfit, and you can see that week on week they've got better. So we know they're a better team than the team that beat us, but we need to make sure that we're ready for this to try and have some sort of reaction. It's a game that we feel as if we've got a point to prove in after letting ourselves down those weeks, and it's about that big question of guys fronting up week to week, back to back, to try and go away and get ourselves back on some sort of win and run here, to try and make sure that back at Balgrey we can put ourselves in a position to win and get ourselves 4 or 5 points, because that's really what we need to try and get a bit of confidence in the squad. And if we get that going, I know we've got the talent there to go away and, as I've said, beat any team on our day. It's just getting that belief and getting that first victory, which has been kind of eluded us for the last few wee while. So we just need to get a bit of belief back in the squad, and hopefully that comes this weekend.
We head through to Glasgow to play Glasgow Hawks at Balgrey on Saturday. We always say this, but it will be a tough match. It's done really well at home this season, Glasgow Hawks. Maybe not so well on the road. We did beat them 29-14 at Kelso, but they're a tough nut to crack up there. Tight pitch, quite a heavy pitch as well. So it'll be a battle, no doubt, and we'll have to get the sleeves rolled up and ready for that challenge, because we put a lot of emphasis on last week to try and get a bit of respect back, which I think we did do. Bitterly disappointed not to get something from the game, and a little bit disappointed not to win the game. But I think, in fairness, Hawick were a better team overall, and they certainly deserve a lot of credit for getting the job done at Poinder last week, because it was a real battle. They showed why they're champions. So fair play to Hawick. We can learn a lot from that ourselves, take it forward to this week. So we need to get back to that intensity. If we can do that, then we'd have a good chance at Glasgow of getting the win or getting something. If we go back to the days of being away to Currie and Marr with just that little bit lacky intensity, then it'll be very difficult to get anything. So let's go with a positive note that we'll be on it on Saturday, and it'll be a great match through there. The last 4 games we've won 3 out of 4 and just narrowly lost to Hawick, so we are in good form. We're continuing to try and progress, and that's the main thing, is getting better each week. And at the moment we're on an upward trajectory regarding that. That's where we really need to be as a club, and keep moving in the right direction. Selection wise, it'll be a fairly settled team. Liam Tate drops out through injury, so does James Thompson. He is needing a full game, that's all. He's not done anything wrong. He's played well when he came on last week, and he'll get another chance shortly. Nick Stingle makes a second start of the season. He's not played since Hawick away, which, unluckily for Nick, he was in on a day where we just didn't get a foothold in the game. So as a scrum half, he didn't get a proper chance. So he's getting a chance on Saturday at Glasgow Hawks, and hopefully Nick does well. Apart from that, there's no really a lot of changes as such. But Cammy Brown comes in to the bench, and Cammy Thompson as well. So we'll see how we get on, and we'll give it our best shot as always.
Neil Hinnigan, who I see has named 5 forwards on the bench of 5. Should we start calling him Razzie Hinnigan or Neil Erasmus, you think?
No, I think Big X fine. I quite like his nickname just now. But
his double's actually at Glasgow Hawks, isn't he? He's got a double.
Oh, you did say it, yeah. We did
They will
see
meet.
that.
They
Yes.
will meet at Belgrade.
Kelso, they've had a remarkable season in the Premiership, I think, from going up from National 1. The culture, I've said about Kelso before, the culture that they've got that club is really good, really positive. They've got an identity in their team now, which, things are really good at Poynder Park. And Kelso going into this game with a little bit of confidence because they've already got the win over Glasgow Hawks. And really, you'd almost argue that they go into this slight favourites because of their position in the league and what they've got to go for, and this would really squeeze Glasgow Hawks down towards the bottom of the table. But as you say, at Belgrade, Glasgow Hawks are a little bit of a different animal. They have struggled on the road. They had a narrow defeat against Selkirk a couple of weeks ago when they conceded a last minute try, so they'll be wanting to try and get that victory and get a little bit of consistency into their campaign.
And interesting as well to hear the ongoing difficulties that Glasgow Hawks always have in terms of selection issues.
He's alluded to it before, Andy, in terms of the challenges that he faces compared to some other coaches. And he's said it before. There's a lot of community clubs in the Premiership. Hawick, Selkirk, Kelso, from a border slant as well. They're towns that are they're playing for their town. They rely on individuals coming through their pathway system and staying there. If they don't go on to university or something else or travel, they hope that they play rugby in their community club. Now, Glasgow Hawks are slightly different, and yes, they do have players, but they're a relatively fresh club as well. They've probably not got that longevity that some of these other teams in the division have, but they've done well to stay at the top table for a long, long time. So, yes, they sometimes have to change their cycle, but they'll benefit from the fact that they've got players like Eric Davey coming back into the team, obviously from Stirling Wolves. They're going to have that step up in quality. Some other teams have already benefited from that so far this season. You've seen the likes of the 2 players that came in for Selkirk at the weekend showed a remarkable improvement in terms of their squad depth. So, obviously Glasgow Hawks will be boosted by that. But again, it's going to be a really challenging game, and I think Kelso are one of those teams that can front up against a really big Hawks team.
Hawick against Edinburgh Accies, first against fourth. Accies desperate to get back to form after 2 defeats against Musselburgh and Heriot's Blues. Hawick very comfortable at Mansfield Park, of course. Here's their head coach, Matty Douglas.
First of all, to come away from Poynder with 5 points is a massive result for us. We took the game very seriously last week. We done a lot of analysis on Kelso, and we didn't take them lightly. We gave them a lot of respect because we knew that the game at Mansfield, they had an off day, and we saw that last season with teams that the return fixture is always the tougher one, and we had to be in the right mindset on Saturday, and I thought we were. I thought some of the rugby we played, we really stretched Kelso. We took our opportunities. We didn't get a lot, if I'm honest. We probably only got 8 or 9 opportunities in the whole game, and look, we've took 4 of them and scored 4 tries. So really happy on that front. A little bit frustrated as a group, not just coaches, but as a group, to give a couple of cards away, and also some silly penalties, but we'll fix that. We've had a good chat this week around it, and we feel that we can be more streetwise and paint better pictures for referees. So look, we've had that chat, and we'll fix that for this weekend. And I think credit does go to Kelso because they stayed in the fight, scored some good tries. Their line out was particularly impressive, and I thought they defended really well at times and put us under serious pressure. But I would pat on the back to our boys going down to 13 men. we had to adapt, and we've saw the game out in the end. You know, we kept the ball for the last 15-16 minutes, and senior players and even the younger players, they've stood up in that situation, and you know, they've got us through the game. And sometimes you have to roll the sleeves up and do it dirty, and we had to. And that's probably you know, as a coach, a pleasing sign that we managed to do that. And training's been, you know, it's been at a really good standard on Tuesday night, heading into what is another massive game against Accies. It's a game that we need to win. We need to keep the pressure on at the top of the table. We've got Currie next week, so for me these next 2 games are crucial. And you know, it starts on Saturday back home at Mansfield. There's a performance coming. There was glimpses on Saturday. There was glimpses the week before against Marr. So look, we're continuing to work hard. We're working really hard at our attack. Defensively, we're bang on, and look, we're excited for Saturday. We get another opportunity to go out and you know, try and put a big performance. And Accies will be looking to bounce back from their defeat on Saturday, so we need to be ready for it. We've got another strong squad to pick from. A couple of boys will be missing, either through injury or suspension, but apart from that, look, we'll be at full strength. And we've had the added bonus. Hector Patterson has been down training this week. He will come into selection process this week alongside Matt Reid, who's been playing Super Sixes in the draft. So again, we'll come into the selection process. So a lot of boys training, and we're excited for Saturday. Buzzing to get back to Mansfield, and excited to see how we go against a good Accies side.
So Hawick into their 5th year of being unbeaten at home, and in no mood to relinquish that record against Edinburgh Accies.
The games between these two sides over the last few years have been pretty entertaining as well. This is almost has a slightly different glimmer on it now, because there is a bit of a gulf between these two sides, and I certainly think with the reintroduction of Hector Patterson just adds that new dynamic. To think that a few weeks ago he was on the bench for Edinburgh, now he's back at Hawick, where he pretty much, you know, continued his journey from Jed when he was when a youngster. So, you know, obviously he'll come back into the Hawick fold, and I think the introduction of Matt Reid as well is a good one. I think probably Hawick at the moment really strong up front, but perhaps do lack that little bit of depth in the back. So the addition of, you know, a really quality scrum half and Matt Reid, who's you know, can play certainly at fullback and can be utilised in the wings, a good addition. So, you know, it's a huge year for Hawick, you know, off the back of a double and the big celebrations that are going on this year. You know, they'll certainly be in no mood to give up that unbeaten streak at home.
And more celebrations, of course, because a centurion and a double centurion in terms of appearances for Hawick. Kirk Ford now into triple figures already, and Stuart Graham, he's hit 200.
Yeah, I think, you know, a little mention for Kirk Ford. I think he's really grown every game he's played for Hawick, and you know, he's a really calm and steady influence at fullback. And we're talking about a really good player coming in to potentially compete for his position, but you know what Kirk Ford offers in terms of his confidence, but you know, his calmness in behind all the madness that happens at Mansfield and in front of him. You know, he's a really steady pair of hands. And then Stuart Graham as well, like the longevity that he's had, you know, and sometimes not always been first choice. You know, for a long period of that time he has been, but there's been a whole host of really quality back row players at Hawick at that time, and he's been able to stay there and be a constant and some really good times for Hawick as well. So, you know, I think it's really good to see a lot of the clubs when they're naming their teams to actually give that recognition. It's something that when I was playing, it was, you know, we didn't get that at the time. And I remember sitting in Hawick actually, and it was the first time I'd thought about it, because I'm sure Kevin Reid was getting an award or something, or he was getting a big landmark, and I thought how classy that was. And Hawick have been one of the teams that have probably done it for a long time, and a lot of the other clubs are now cottoning on and putting that. And it's nice to see when you're looking at fixtures coming up, how many games that player has played for their club, and you know, it's certainly a personal milestone that they'll look back on.
Accies still in 4th place, of course, but 2 defeats in a row. They can't afford many more, and this one's really going to be crucial for them.
Yeah, I think, you know, they can't afford many more because of how tight the race for the top 4 is, and obviously off the back of a defeat against Heriot at the weekend past, it means that they need to go on a really good run, because they need wins. They need to make sure that they get a good amount of wins to keep everybody else away from them. Now, at the beginning of the season, I'd said that Edinburgh Accies, for me, were the top 4 side. You know, they were the 4th one of the cluster that we had. Musselburgh have overperformed in terms of my expectations. Heriot's likewise. and you've got to say Kelso as well. So, those teams are craning their necks upwards to try and catch Edinburgh Accies, and they'll be hoping this weekend Hawick do them a favour and they can kind of steal a march in them.
Heriot's Blues versus Currie then, another Edinburgh derby at Golden Acre. Only lost once this season at home by a point to Kelso, and Currie back to form and hitting their straps.
Yeah, I think this is a different game though. In terms of at Golden Acre, Heriot's chasing down that 4th position. Now, off the back of the weekend, if I remember back when we first started doing this and looking at results, and then the next week it was completely different. If we were to look at the results from last weekend, Heriot's with a good result away from home, Currie with a huge victory at home against another top 4 rival. I think this game has a slightly different tinge on it, and I do fancy Heriot's to put in a really good performance. The one thing that casts a little bit of doubt in my mind is the fact that Kelso have been able to go to Golden Acre and turn them over, but we know that Heriot's are in a really fortunate position that they've got the lion's share of their games for the lead into the end of the season are at home. So they've got that to target. They need to make sure home form counts, and it'll be an interesting game. But Currie come into the back of it with a lot of confidence from a great performance at home last weekend. But this is a big game for both sides in terms of where they want to end up at the end of the season.
Musselburgh versus Jedforest. Now, Musselburgh defended the Bill McLaren Shield after getting across the line late on against Edinburgh Accies 37-35 a couple of weeks ago. On paper, this should be a more comfortable day than what they had last week when Currie put 50 points on them, but both teams enjoy throwing the ball about, and if Jed can get off to a good start, I think we could actually see a very entertaining, high-scoring game. We're going to hear from Jed coach David Grieve.
On Saturday, we played Selkirk down at Jed. It was a game we had to win, but kind of what happened was we were second best probably all over the field, particularly in the scrum, and we just couldn't handle the driving line out. We know where we are. Although we're not mathematically down, it would take a miracle. But I can assure anyone that's interested that we are already planning for next season, and wherever we end up, we'll be in a far stronger position.
Well, we've heard some solemn sound bites from David over the weeks. Sadly, this is another one. This is probably his shortest one that he's done. But really, it's all been said, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they weren't second best everywhere. I think discipline-wise, they were the better team out of the two. But, in terms of the overall performance, yes, they were second best. But I was somewhat surprised to go down to Riverside Park and kind of feel a bit more positivity than is actually going on at the club just now. If you look at the table and you look at the fact they're rock bottom, there's a big gulf between them and the teams round about them, you would think it's quite ominous. But really, and especially that soundbite as well, it doesn't sound great. But Gregor Young at the end, when he was given his opinions, they were honest, and I think that's probably what Jed needs just now, just a little bit of honesty, see where they are, and then they can press the reset button. They've done it before. It'll be really, really hard to replicate that and go down the divisions and come back up to the Premiership now, because there's a whole host of teams that are competing in the same space. But they know where they are, I think, and it's just that honest conversation at Riverside to say that we've got some really talented young players coming through. We've got some probably at the latter stages of their career. They need to bolster that squad, but it's not all doom and gloom. But on Saturday, it was a poor game by all accounts, and Jed were the poorer of both sides, and Selkirk were able to get a good 5-pointer on the road.
But with just about everything pointing to relegation, having this little chance here for a bit of silverware could be something that they'll actually get up for, as well as obviously looking for their first win. I mean, particularly after Musselburgh conceded a lot of points last week.
Yeah, you could be looking at that two ways. You're almost going to be on the end of a Musselburgh backlash, or you're getting them when they're down, and Jedforest have a game that they've always had that just frustrates other teams, because you can never quite predict how Jed are going to play. Now, there was a replacement in the game. They showed up the scrum. They were a bit naive at the line out and driving maul at the start. They've only really got one target in the line out. Blake Roth was being used kind of every single target, but that points to the fact that they've got a depleted squad. Now, like Don Buckley went off with an injury as well. There was a reshuffle. So it'll be interesting to see when the team comes out, that when you can look at that lineup and think, I think this is a Jed team that can realistically go to Musselburgh and pick up a victory. But like all Jed players, like I hear David Grieve there speaking about the fact that if anybody's interested, now I'm interested to know that Jed are going to be up for the fight. I know they will have played them in dead rubbers and seen them as competitive as ever, as if they were going to win a cup final. But they'll go on the road, they'll give a good account of themselves, but it's a big task to go to Stoneyhill against Musselburgh when they'll be looking to defend that trophy as well. I think we can't understate that. They've got their hands on that Bill McLaren Shield, and they'll certainly not want to relinquish it against Jed.
I may be wrong, but I don't think Jed have ever had their hands on it before.
They probably are. That's a common occurrence for you to be wrong, Stuart. But yeah, it's been in the hands of some clubs for a long time, and obviously Marr got their hands back on it and swapped it quite quickly and gave it to Musselburgh. So I do like it. I think it's probably needing a little bit more backing in terms of making it more public and having that history. It's going to take time. You don't get history overnight, but it is going to take a bit of time for us to see that kind of legacy. But from my memory, I can't remember Jed having their mitts on it.
Selkirk versus Marr is the other game. Marr traditionally find it tough playing in the Borders. Selkirk are certainly one of their bogie teams, both home and away. Let's hear from the two coaches, Steve Adair, who's looking after Marr at the moment, and of course the head coach of Selkirk, Sesh Henderson.
Really good win for us last week. Potential banana skin because I thought Jed were building a little bit of momentum in some of the games that they were playing. Plus, they had a really strong back three last week, but we kind of took the pressure off them after the first 5 minutes. They had a lot of possession. When we got the ball, we scored three really good tries in the first half and just took the momentum away from them. It was really pleasing. Really disappointed the amount of penalties we gave away. However, our defensive sets were pretty solid, and we scored 2 good tries in the second half to take the game away and came away with the points. That was our goal. Our goal was to get further away from Jed, but also get into the pack above us. For now, we're above Hawks, but Saturday's game is going to be another big game for us in terms of where are we just now. Playing Marr, who are one of the best sides in Scotland, as you know. That's why they're at the top of the league. We want to really be competitive at the weekend, and their forwards are really strong at the moment, and it's got some quality backs as well. Ben Pickles is playing really well, so is Callum Anderson, so we've got strength across the back line. So we want to try and go out on Saturday and just really put in a massive competitive performance. And against Marr, we know it's going to be physical. Their attack shape is really strong, but however, we believe that we can take them to the last 10-15 minutes, and if we can, then why not believe we can win? There's no point in playing if we can't believe we've got to win, and we can and get points. So we're really looking forward to Saturday. It's going to be a massive test, but we're going to try and get that performance edge in our attack and our defence, and let's see what happens.
We have another massive game this week down in the Borders. We were happy with about 50 minutes of our performance against Hawks. We managed to get the bonus point before half time. Obviously the weather had factors in that, but we took our chances when they were on offer, and it put us in a nice position. Second half, towards the end of the game, our discipline was really, really poor. Went down to 13 men, which we know this weekend we cannot do against Selkirk or we'll be punished. Selkirk, look, they're in a great bit of form at the minute. They beat Jed last week, and they beat Hawks at home the weekend before with a last minute try. So we know that we must be on the ball for 80 minutes, and we need to match them physically. Obviously, we need to work hard on and off the ball, and our defence needs to be watertight to try and stop Selkirk source. We have a relatively unchanged squad this week, which is nice. The guys, they've been working really hard and implementing what we're looking for this weekend. We've had good numbers, some guys trying to push into the team, but we've obviously rewarded the guys last week that put in a great shift against Hawks. We're obviously well aware what this game means. We've obviously played twice in the Borders so far this season. We won one, lost one, so we know how tough it will be coming down to Selkirk and trying to obviously take some points for that game. We're obviously trying to keep pressure on the top of the table, and we've got Currie hot in our tails for that home semi-final spot at the moment. So we're well aware of we're going to need a full 80-minute performance to try and get over the line on Saturday.
Tricky one to call this one. Selkirk eyeing up a win to take them closer to the likes of Kelso and Musselburgh. Marr trying to stay above Currie to cement that home playoff spot.
Yeah, it is quite a difficult one because Selkirk almost have nothing to play for now in terms of, you do, especially when you listen to Jed as well. I think they're completely consigned themselves to the fact that they're going to be relegated. So Selkirk don't have a lot to play for. it is the fact that they're at home, and it's a big occasion to try, and I think there's going to be a sizable crowd there as well. I think there's a sponsors on at the weekend as well, so they'll have an incentive to put on a performance at home, and sometimes those games as well, that's when the pressure's off, when you play your best rugby. So Selkirk might go into this as feeling a little bit relieved. They've got their big win last weekend against Jed. It pretty much was the final nail in the coffin, you would say. So they go into this at home to try and continue that momentum that they've built against a really positive victory against Glasgow Hawks again a couple of weeks ago. But Marr know, and I think Marr were completely shadowed themselves last season, and they now know they don't want to be in that level again, and they've performed really well so far this season. 2 really big victories at home, and you could hear Stephen Adair speaking there about the fact that they know Currie are breathing down their necks. So they know they need to come down to Philippoch, they need to pick up the victory and then get back to Troon, and they can then concentrate the next weekend. But it is a difficult game to call because of all of those mitigating factors in this fixture.
On to National 1 then, and last week the results turned out like this. Dundee 15, Ayr 43, Gala 56, GHK 12, Glasgow Accies 17, Watsonians 18, Highland 3, GHA 21, and Melrose 29, Biggar 45. Now the first 2 games pretty predictable, and if your name is Robin Purdy, you'd have put your mortgage on that one, and that was indeed the case. However, Robin would also have put his mortgage on wins for Glasgow Accies, Highland and Melrose to win the other 3, and if he had have done, he'd have come unstuck.
Yeah, I think that just shows you the kind of National 1 landscape at the moment. It's quite unpredictable, and sometimes in that little middle battle in the league, some of those results are a bit topsy-turvy, especially Glasgow Accies. They've been scoring a lot of points, especially at home, and they're only able to get 17 this weekend. So, perhaps their minds are not as focused on trying to get promotion and striving for that now, because they know Ayr are relentless. So, all those teams that you mentioned, Highland being one of them as well, they're probably starting to be comfortable with the fact that I don't think Ayr are going to be stopped.
And of course Highland losing at home for the very first time, and it was interesting to see GHA, and the score kept coming through, and it was like another 3 points penalty, another penalty, and you presume that's frustration from Highland for not being able to get past them.
It's just sometimes conditions as well. It's playing in the right areas. I think we've seen that a bit from Selkirk at the weekend. They were able to pin Jed back and play rugby in the right positions, and the weather was a little bit of a leveller last weekend in some fixtures. When you look at the results coming through, you perhaps thought the rain and the clar that was on the pitches, that was perhaps something that's just made it a little bit of a leveller. So I don't really know the context of the Highland game, because obviously it's a 3G pitch, so certainly the mud's not going to be an issue. But sometimes you can just the wind, a change in direction, and as you say, frustration can just lead to a bit of scoreboard pressure. And
Melrose couldn't blame the mud either on their 3G pitch. They were 17-0 up, and Biggar got them 45-29.
I think I was speaking to Craig Borthwick before. It was on the Friday night, and there were some things that were said that were used, and I think that's the beauty of this. Like, who shines a light on Scottish club rugby at this level other than yourself? But you've got teams listening on previews from other teams, and I think that the way Melrose, and this is their interpretation, the way they articulated what they were doing really riled Biggar. And, Biggar haven't been great this season, so it was going to take something to lift their performance, but it was certainly that. And, I think it was in particular the purr. They're purring. I think that was the comment which Craig did point to, and then messaged me later on saying they were purring. They were like kittens in the forwards. So, that's what we want in club rugby. We want a little bit. He's got a lot of respect for Ian Chisholm as well. So it's not, it's not nasty by any stretch of the imagination. But that's sometimes what you need. I remember years ago, we beat Gala away at Netherdale, and I wrote on a Peebles top and put it on the back of Richie Gray's pickup. And him and Gary Parker were Gala coaches at the time. And then a couple of weeks later, we got pumped at home. And then a couple of weeks later, Richie Gray just came up and said, "Oh, thanks for the team talk." And I was kind of thinking, what? And I was like 17 years old. And he just had the shirt and he goes, "I just put that in the changing room," and that really pissed everybody off. And you're like, club rugby, and a good connection. It was a laugh. You leave it in the field and move on. And I think Biggar have used that as a little bit of fuel to get a really, really good victory on the road. And we were talking about that last couple of weeks ago, wasn't it? When Musselburgh came off the bus and Kevin Utterson, seeing them drinking and being fairly casual in their approach, and straight to the dressing room, it riled Kelso up big time. Yeah, you sometimes just need a little point of difference, and it can be something on the field, or it can be something in your mindset. And obviously that is something, and obviously when I was mentioning Craig Borthwick, he's part of the coaching team there as well, so that would have been his message to the players, and a lot of those players are local bigger guys, and they'll have probably taken that as a little bit of disrespect, but it's just part of the kind of pantomime that is our club game. It's great to see. From a Melrose point of view, it's not ideal because they're not having the great season that perhaps I did think they were going to have, especially with Ian Chisholm being head coach. But heavy defeat, and Biggar get another victory, and we said they were coming, and they've managed to get 3.
We were very patient with them, weren't we?
We had to be, but they've got them now, and then it's lifted them off the foot of the table and made it quite comfortable for them.
Yeah, Highlands 2 losses though has really made the difference now. Ayr 11 out of 11, 53 points at the top. Highland in second still, but 3 losses now, 37 points. That's a big gap. Glasgow Accies in third on 34. Melrose in fourth, 33. Gala in fifth place, but played a game more. They're also on 33. GHA in sixth position, 30. Watsori in 7th with 28. Biggar 8th, 22. Dundee 9th, 17. And GHK 10th place, 13 points. So Ayr pretty much home and hosed even at this early part of the season. But down the bottom, it's quite interesting. GHK obviously are the team out of form at the moment, but there's still a lot of matches they can pick up.
Yeah, it's like we were speaking about Biggar there. They went on a horrid run of form, and obviously Melrose had a huge victory at Hartree Mill. So you can see how quickly things can turn in this division, and all it's going to take is a couple of victories, get that confidence, and then they can bring some of these clubs back into the game. And that's the beauty of the league structure and how these 10-team leagues are working a little bit more. The quality is a lot closer in these teams. I think if you have that as a 12-team division, if you think sometimes the teams that you can have in that, there's usually a bit of a gulf. But that's an interesting league at the bottom. But I totally agree with you, and I'm glad you agree with me now, because the fact that Ayr are home and hosed, they're going to be playing Premiership rugby next year.
Well, this Saturday's games in National 1, starting with Ayr versus Melrose, first against fourth. That's our feature game on Rugby Radio on Saturday from 1:30. Available, as usual, at rugbyradio.co.uk. And we'll be having a chat with a number of people across at Millbrae to find out more about the club, their amazing season, the Bulls finishing second in Super Series. We'll also be hearing about the youth development at the club, the plans for the future, and plenty of other talking points as well. But before all that, let's have a listen to Grant Anderson, the head coach of Ayr.
We were pleased on Saturday to come away with the 5 points. The game had been moved. We only found out about that at something like 9:30 in the morning. Before that, we had been told it potentially could be on a 4G, and then on the way up we were sent a postcode and then found out that the game was then being playing at Morgan Rugby Club. So I was really pleased with the kind of mentality of the boys to not let that faze them. Being away from Mayfield and on a pitch of such a poor quality. It's probably one of the worst pitches I've ever seen a game played by an Ayr team on, if I'm honest. Especially the weather didn't help, and the fact that it's on a hill and runs sideways, and it was really, anyway, that's what it was. We targeted 5 points from that game. We had done our homework on Dundee as best we could. And from a group point of view from us, we had made some changes again, and everybody who came in or played in that game really stood up and really demonstrated what we're looking for, which I was really pleased with. I was especially pleased with Caleb Ray in the front row. I thought he was phenomenal all day. He was our man of the match. Adam Prentice, when he came on, really put Dundee's scrum to the sword, and then Joe Stafford, and especially in attack, just phenomenal ball carries, which gave us a fantastic platform to either continue playing with our forwards or for the backs to attack from. So we scored some tries I was really happy with, a couple of maul tries, a couple of tries from scrum, a couple of tries from the backs after forwards, connecting within our system. So I was really pleased with that in difficult conditions. Melrose on Saturday, which is always a massive fixture at Millbrae. A lot of history between the two clubs. I haven't actually looked too much at Melrose or their results. Actually, I've just been focusing on ourselves. Hopefully we're able to again execute both our systems. When we get that right, we're a difficult team to beat. The boys are doing what we're asking them to do. For me, it's about basic skills. It's executing basic skills under pressure, doing the basics well to a high standard consistently, and then that usually we end up where we want to be, or round about where we want to be. So that would be the plan for us moving forward, but very much looking forward to the game.
So Ayr going for 12 out of 12. Wasn't happy about that pitch, was he?
No, I'm glad we've praised groundskeepers before, but I don't think we'll be praising this one. But he's obviously never played at Haddington. That's like Kilimanjaro trying to get up in that corner. But obviously, he's obviously a bit disappointed about the way that the pitch was. But
they still put 50 odd points on, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. They've still been able to pick up the victory, and they're
43.
They're relentless. They're relentless just now, Ayr. So. The good thing is he's alluded to the fact this is a huge fixture. In terms of the rugby calendar, Ayr Melrose over the last few decades has been a huge rugby fixture. Yes, it's in National 1. Yes, they're perhaps poles apart just now. It's still going to be a big game at Milbury.
What was your worst pitch then? Was it Haddington?
I'd probably say Haddington. I'm
sure it's better now, though.
Yeah, I'm sure it's better now. I do have something that will probably come on to about pitches later on that it still haunts me to this day. But it wasn't the condition of the pitch, it was perhaps some of the ornaments that were left on the pitch. That's something we can talk about later on. But, I think Haddington, for me, Haddington was actually an alright pitch. But, there's some brilliant pitches lower down the leagues as well, like Caberston, was a brilliant pitch for Walkerburn and stuff like that. So we've played on some of those pitches before, but yeah, I'd probably go with Haddington. For me, was my least favourite pitch to play on. Yes,
I think I know what you're referring to now. I think Scott Cubitt, was the referee. Tell me more. Get it off your chest.
Yeah, well, it's not on my chest.
It's on the pitch.
Yeah, Scott Cubitt. He was obviously, I'd seen it on social media, and it was just I had a quick giggle because it's brilliant about club rugby, and I still don't know the context of how he's removed it. But Falkirk tweeted at Ruby's Law that there was dog faeces on the ground, and the referee actually removed it, so there was a break in play. And I thought, it's just brilliant. In terms of our match officials, they get a hard time from spectators and players alike, but he's went above and beyond the call of duty. And so that then brings me to my point about the worst pitch I've played on was Pennycook in a pre-season game. Tackled the guy in the corner. We've went off the pitch and my right side's covered. And I just remember, I was young as well, I think I was 18 at the time, and 17, 18, and I just remember being miserable, and then Bruce McNaughton just taking me off because I was absolutely covered, and it was just horrific. It was like one of the worst rugby experiences I've probably had, apart from getting hammered by Melrose every other year. But, being sliding in that is absolutely rancid. So Pennycook's my worst rugby pitch experience, but Haddington's my worst rugby pitch.
Yeah, and we have a giggle about it, but there is a serious side to this as well, isn't it? And we see it all the time about people with dogs who have no respect at all, and come Saturday morning, there are people out there who are clearing it off.
Yeah, it is disappointing, and especially when all these clubs are run by really brilliant volunteers, and they're a hub of the community, and sometimes it's just those little things in society which let us down. But we're not nobody's perfect, so it's great that it was actually spotted hopefully before anybody's been tackled into it, perhaps. And yeah, I'm glad the referee, and I think on top of that as well, I think Scott Cubitt as well. We've seen him in a few games refereeing. I think he's a really good match official as well. So obviously he's adding that to his arsenal of talents.
Indeed he is. Well, back to National 1 in this game. Ayr 20 points ahead of Melrose at the moment. Fortunately, no playoffs in the National League for them to worry about, but as you'll hear now from head coach at Melrose, Ian Chisholm, right now he'd snap your hand off for something like the playoffs. I went down to meet him on Tuesday night. This is halfway through the season now. What's your own assessment of what's happened so far?
I think we've had some real positive performances, and even in the games where we've really struggled, took an absolute whacking here against Glasgow Hawks, 62 points we shipped, but we played a lot of really good attacking rugby there, and we learned a lot defensively and set piece wise about what we're doing. And then Saturday again, it was another loss at home for us against Biggar after being 24-7 up at half time, I think it was. And look, it just shows when you're missing a few key people, that consistency and performance struggles. If you take away a key element of rugby, which is physicality and aggression, and you don't show that, I think you're going to struggle to win games. And we knew coming into the season our biggest struggle was going to be at set piece. So losing a couple of boys that were moving on, that we were pretty reliant on, didn't really help. So while we're not overly happy with where we are, we're still within touching distance of second place, which is absolutely insane when you think about it. So for us, that's what we're looking at now. I don't think anybody's going to catch Ayr. I think they're just, they've got a huge playing squad. They've been pretty lucky with injuries. They're really consistent, and they're good at their own version of the game. So in summary, my assessment of our season is inconsistent, but look, when we've turned it on, we've been bloody good. And for me, it's, this weekend we're looking for an 80-minute performance. We're looking for physicality, and we're just looking to simplify things a wee bit and help the younger boys that are coming into it. Because I think if you have a look at the makeup of our squad over the last 3 months, let's say, we've had a minimum of 3-4 teenagers in the squad every time, and that's great for the future. Melrose is a club that always wants to win. We don't go into any game not trying to win and not wanting to win. We just need to make sure that we execute when it comes to it, and then we make sure that these young boys have enough belief in themselves that they can kick on and be big players for us come in the future.
Melrose Air is one of the great fixtures. You always look for it in the calendar, and the history between the two clubs is immense, and there's been some real ding-dongs over the years. This will be your first time in charge of Melrose, going to Millbrae.
Yeah, I was up there a few years ago with Bert as his assistant coach. It's a tough place to go. There's a real West Coast mentality where the crowd will get into you, and they'll jump on any sort of lack of control that anybody shows in terms of temper or anger or just body language. And it's pretty obvious what Ayr are going to bring. They're going to be physical. They're going to bring a lot of line speed. They're going to be really good at the 1%ers that they get right around the line out scrum. We think their contact skills are outstanding. It's a real point of difference for them. We have a plan going up there, and our squad's still not finalised. It's just one of those things where we need to see who's available, who's out the medical room, who's off night shift, does a baby come or not, and that's just where we are at the moment. But we've got to put a positive spin on everything, in that, cool, Goose isn't available, great, this is an opportunity for young Dylan Coburn. Or Bruce Colvin's not available, great, this is an opportunity for Cammy Robertson. Just stuff like that, where if we frame things in a positive way, then I think good things will come of that. It's contagious.
When people look at results, that's all they see. Yep. But there's a big story behind every result, and sometimes you're performing well because you've got a full squad. Other times you're picking from a second team effectively because your first teams are out.
Yeah, 100%. I think last week was a good example where we had to go up to Peebles at Reds at second 15 level when uncontested scrum because they were all playing against bigger. It's great for these boys to get exposure to first team rugby because they're not going to get better if we didn't give them games. And if you do look at the league table, other results went our way. We want to keep creeping up the table. We want to make sure that our boys are staying motivated, and this is what you were saying earlier around you've maybe planned a game and it goes to a dead rubber, and then you have to think something different. And I know your stance on playoffs, and I know Dale sits on the fence with a lot of different stuff, and he's like a politician, that man. He never really says whether he's coming or gone. And I suppose it depends how much skin in the game you've got. Because for me, I'd be crying out for a playoff right now. I'd be crying out for a second place game, because our biggest challenge is keeping boys motivated. How do you keep trying to get 40-50 boys down here, and like this weekend we don't have a Reds game, we've just been pumped at home off bigger last weekend. How do you get boys motivated? And luckily for me, Melrose boys are really loyal, they work really hard, they're really proud to represent their club, and if you stick around you'll probably see 30-40 boys out here training the night working really hard. And we're a diverse group, let's say, and we're all connected together in a common goal, and this weekend that focus is there. It's going to be a real challenge for us, but it's a challenge that we're desperate to get after. It's interesting you mentioned the playoffs. That's one of my pet subjects, as you know, but my brief has always been about winning a championship with a playoff match, and National 1, National 2, National 3, National 4 doesn't have that at all. So if Ayr continue the way they're going to win. But it's pretty unusual for a team to run away with it, or a team at the moment like Jedforest, sadly, 19 points adrift. It does make games become a dead rubber quite quickly. So there is this element which we used to have in the past, which I wasn't really against, and that was like the 9th team from a top division to play a second team from the lower region, and that I don't have a problem with at all. Yeah, and look, I think if we were to take a format like Ayr win, like NRL, where they have a minor premiership and then they've got to go through and they've got to win. It's all based on where you are. For Ayr, for example, they won't want that. They're quite happy to win a league, but for me, I don't care about Ayr. I care about Melrose, and I care about my boys being motivated. I still want them to be turning up in January, and other boys will be the same. You look at a mid-table team in Nat 1 or the Premiership, and the biggest issue we have at the moment is keeping boys motivated. What drives them to keep coming along? If it's just rugby they're after, then we're going to struggle. But if it's being part of something bigger, like representing your tune, representing your club, being in amongst the boys, then I suppose that could take a place at a playoff. But I think for circumstances like this, it would be nice. But I know you need consistency year to year. I would be saying different if we were top of the league by 20 odd points like Ayr were.
No, I still think if you win the league, that's it. As far as I'm concerned, that always will be the case. And it is unusual for a 10-team league, because before it was 12-team leagues, and you could see after the first team who win it, you know, you got second to six, just like they do in football, I suppose. And then you've got something to aim for. Because at the moment, we're 3-4 weeks away from Christmas. It's pretty much nailed on now for Ayr, you would say. But in some of the other leagues, of course, you look in Division 3 and Division 4, and your Preston Lodges and your Garnocks and Orkneys, some great games left in that league.
Yeah, and look, I'm hoping Peebles get promoted next season. I think they're going well. I think it makes a difference having a line out in Currie. I just need to stop him going to top sales and they'll be fine, I think. But yeah, I get that, and I think, like I was saying, it's circumstantial, isn't it? If I was top of the league by 20 points, I would want the league to be won. So it's having your cake and eating it, isn't it?
Absolutely. Ian Chisholm, who had a bit of a go at you there, didn't he? Actually, I have to say, I've never found you sitting on the fence ever about anything, so I think he's got that one wrong.
Well, that's the first time. That might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me. And I think it was ironic, because he didn't really give an opinion if he wanted it or not either.
But I mean, you've always had opinions, you've given them, and you've been criticised for it as well.
I totally have. Like, I think that I've got huge imposter syndrome, because I just think that I wasn't really a great rugby player anyway, and somehow I've been able to cover a lot of rugby over the last decade. I've been able to cover Scotland games, semi-professional games, club games, youth games, and I've taken on a lot of rugby, and from that as well, I do have a lot of opinions, and I'm also happy to be wrong. I quite like the fact that I am happy to have my opinion, fight my case, be wrong, or also just be respectful in the fact that I sometimes like to, take the product of rugby in a slightly different way. And I think that's where we obviously we've got a continual disagreement in terms of the playoffs. And, obviously Ian there was speaking about it from two slants, and obviously not really committing to either. But he's saying if Melrose were top of the league, you'd want them to be champions, and then obviously if they're in a playoff situation and with a chance to go up, they would like to roll the dice. And for me, I do like that element of it. In club rugby in the National League, I just don't think, I was looking at the league table there and looking at thinking, would you replace a Glasgow Hawks or a Selkirk with a Glasgow Accies if it was a playoff system, or potentially a Highland? I think at the moment, when you look at changing Jed for Ayr, I think it's a pretty straight swap. But if you don't like playoffs, for me, and this is my opinion on what you've got, if you don't like playoffs, I would say just keep a traditional league system, one up, one down, champion at the top and stuff like that. But, I do see your argument in terms of a relegation playoff, but I do still quite like the championship element. And I know the Super Series one has, if anything, given you more cause to be frustrated, anxious, or whatever. But that's the kind of way I do like rugby. I like to absorb it that way, and it's interesting.
But it is something I predicted, isn't it? That one day the fourth team in a playoff is going to actually win this, and they were 19, 20 points behind the team at the very top. And I think how they can then be called Scottish champions, having lost half their games. They won 6, but they lost 6 as well. We've got to call them Scottish champions now. Great club, nothing against the club at all. It just seems totally wrong to me, and the whole credibility goes out the window, particularly when you're trying to sell a product like Super Series, and then you show this scenario, which has now actually turned out to happen, and you've got a team that was actually finished 4th in the league out of only 6 teams, let's not forget, 7 with futures. It just doesn't seem right.
And I totally get that argument. I think that Stirling Wolves had to get into the playoffs by the last weekend. The Southern Knights could almost been in their position. They've improved from last year, but they have been poor. Stirling Wolves, I've covered a few games in Super Series, so I do feel like I've got a position to have an opinion. And Stirling Wolves were poor in some of the games that I had watched. They absolutely howked the futures when I went up there, but that wasn't really a signal of how good they were. That probably was more of a signal of how poor the futures have been, and I think that concept hasn't worked either. And in light of the AGM as well, they're looking at what that pathway should be. The one thing I am completely sold on is that there needs to be a product of that level in that space, because it doesn't work in the club game anymore. I don't think so. The rugby's evolved, and we need to make sure that there is that pathway for players to go up. The under 20 players need to be immersed in that environment with some of the more experienced players. They can't be standalone. They were cannon fodder, and I think that if anything, that's going to have a more negative impact over the next couple of years for the under 20s. But back to the playoff scenario, at the beginning of the competition, everybody knows what you need to do. So Stirling Wolves always had that incentive to try and get in the playoffs, even though they were playing poorly, to go, let's salvage something, let's get a couple of games to have a shot at it. when they got to there, they started to play cup rugby, not league rugby. We don't see a lot of teams, going for the posts in Super Series. It's tries. They want to be kicking at the corner. They want to be running their driving maul and making sure that they're getting loads of tries. It's exciting and entertaining rugby at times because it is quite, it's that level between club rugby and professional rugby. So there's a lot of errors, a lot of great skill on display. But they've got themselves into that position. They've beat Heriot in a game of cup rugby, and they've caught Ayrshire Bulls cold as well and beat them in a game of cup rugby. And I totally agree your argument that they finished fourth and then they're Scottish champions. But at the beginning, every single head coach, every single member involved in those clubs know you have to win your 12 games in the league campaign, and then you've got 2 more to go before you're champions, and that is the competition. So, I like it because for me, it just does keep that little bit of interest in the end. And, we've seen Marr be successful, and what a story that was, in time. So, that it's not everybody's cup of tea, but neither's league rugby either.
But league rugby turns into cup rugby, as you said. So 18 matches, suddenly you've played 18 matches, doesn't matter now, it's all scrapped.
And I get that because then I look at like the Sprint Series, which is almost like a dry run of the Super Series Championship. But I think we've had this conversation many a time and then not spoke for weeks after because we fall out. But, in terms of, let's look at the national game, right? Let's not talk about Super Series. Talk about the national game and the fact that we've had a playoff before where the champion has won. We've had a playoff before where top of the table hasn't won. And we talk about, where's the cup now? Where is the knockout cup competition? That used to be such a huge day for our club game to real showcase it. And I remember sometimes when we had the Shield and it was Glasgow Hawks who were in the Premiership, playing Peebles at the time, obviously my club, injured as always, I wasn't able to play, but they were the 2 teams, and that was a really quality Shield. And you look at some of the fixtures now, and this is not to be detrimental to any club, but the finals day that we had needs a lot of work. And I think that you then can negate the need for that playoff system, because what they're trying to do in any playoff system is showcase the top quality level of rugby that we've got. So with our playoff last year, Hawick versus Currie was a great game. Hawick down to 13 men, last minute try, great occasion. One of Scotland's best commentators at the time, Stuart McLaren, voicing over it for Scottish Rugby. Robin Purdy was doing it for our station here. There was a lot of coverage on that, and that is what they try to do. No other game has had that in the club game this season or last season. It is that one showpiece game, and it's an opportunity to try and showcase it. And we've spoken about it before. Money in rugby, there's not a lot of money in rugby. There's certainly less money in national club amateur rugby, and it's an opportunity to try and make it more attractive for people to play it in the future, make it sustainable. And yes, it might not be the best avenue in your eyes to make that happen, but they need to try something different, because Hawick, with 2 games to go, winning the league, is not going to get the same coverage, it's not going to get the same exposure, and it's an opportunity to go, right, well, let's try and fluff up the club game and give it an opportunity. The one thing it doesn't do is replicate that throughout the leagues and throughout the divisions, which is a bit of a shame. But there's work needs to be done there, and I think, after the AGM and for Scottish Rugby and reading some stuff, and it's probably the first time in my life I've actually went and read it and found bits of it interesting, there has to be a little bit of a shake-up. And I think the club game is in a decent spot now because of Super Series, and now they've taken that away, they have to fix what that is meant to be to allow that pathway for players through. But I do like the 10-team leagues, the playoff system. I like, teams coming up from regional rugby, international rugby. I think it's in a decent spot. Well, certainly the final was a fantastic final, and it was a fantastic showcase. It could easily have gone the other way, though. It could have been, a 40-0 romp or whatever. It just happened to be a good match, and so that obviously helps to sell the idea. There is a solution to this, I think, and it's the solution that I wrote about for the offside line several months ago, which was using the idea of league positions counting towards a revised cup competition, using your finishing position as seeds. That way, every match right to the end is important for your seeding. You have a Premiership Cup, you have a National 1 Cup, you have a National 2 Cup. So the 10 teams who are on, at that same standard are basically going to be going head to head for a particular cup. And if they lose the first match, then they go into the play of that Premiership Cup. So you've always got good standard of competition, and you start off with like first against 8th or second against 7th, whatever, and the 9th team would play against the team in second place from the league down below. There is something there, and I really do like your idea, because we've spoke about it before, I've seen it, but there's something needs done with the cup competition, whether it's your format with the seeding and you've got the cup and the play in each division, or whether there's a little bit of a merging of a couple of the leagues together. Something certainly does need done, but It's just a bit of a shame that such a brilliant competition, which was probably one of the first things to really spark a big bit of interest in me, watching it on the TV, huge crowd at Murrayfield, and watching it was a border team at the time, watching Hawick beat Hawks in the final 2 decades ago when they won the double. That was one of the things that really interested me, for the fact that it's come from there to where we are now. It's slightly disheartening, but hopefully there can be something to revitalise it, because that could be the thing that's going to make you settle in the rest of your life, Stuart, and we can get rid of the playoffs if the cup competition is sorted.
Do check out the article. It's still available on the Offside Line. I think, I have kind of researched it and looked at it, and I think it does tick a lot of boxes. It brings the cup back into play again as a meaningful thing. It means that whoever finishes top of the Premiership actually is the champion of Scotland, based on the fact that it was a league that they were winning in the first place. Your dead rubbers, that sorts that out as well, because you've got no dead rubbers, and you've also got these extra games at the end of the season where everyone is guaranteed another 3 matches, and that was something which again will boost revenue, because you've got teams who are able to play sort of later on. So to me, it's looking after the league, it's looking after the cup, and it needs the clubs to get behind it, obviously, and push it.
Yeah, and I think also on that, like when you were talking about this candidly, just with inter-district stuff coming in as well, there is obviously the opportunity that some clubs, it might just change the cup competition because they would have to have more depth in their squad, because they might lose personnel and stuff like that. So there needs to be a more consistent calendar in the grassroots game, because that is the thing that props everything else up. It's the thing that makes your youth section thrive as well, when they've got that conduit between your proper grassroots, your youth section, your minis and your middies, straight up to your first team and your adult rugby. That's the thing that makes your semi-professional, your professional, your national game grow. So there is scope there, and I think you're going to have to start canvassing the clubs again to get that over the line.
Well, that's our weekly spat over playoffs sorted, and we're never going to win each other over, obviously, when it comes to that debate, but there is some common ground there, and for the sake of the game in Scotland, I just hope that the clubs treat it seriously and put the emphasis back on cup rugby, and also make a league again, which I think the majority of people would actually want. Anyway, back to the rugby, and we're in National 1. If you remember, we were talking about Melrose against Ayr. We're looking forward to that game on Saturday. There'll be a boxing ring as well for Ian Chisholm versus Dale Clancy, refereed by Robin Purdy, which I think is going to be very exciting as the pre-match warm-up to that one. But let's go back to another game, and it's Biggar against Gala, and we can hear now from Director of Rugby at Gala, and that's Ewan Swinton.
Last Saturday against GHK, the game started off pretty much as you would expect. GHK were a stuffy opponent in the first half. They took the lead and restricted us to 2 tries, one of which came pretty much on the final whistle of the first half. They brought it to us in the forwards. Our game was well formed, but we struggled in certain areas, and we certainly weren't dominant in the first half. However, when we got into the second half, things changed completely. Gala scored an early try, and they kept on flowing. There were some real beauties in amongst them. One from Murray Wilson was just a thing of beauty, and I think it instilled a real sense of confidence in the rest of the team. And we started to run the ball very freely, very wide, and really quite impressively, scoring 8 second half tries. The performance was pretty complete. The forwards became dominant. The backs were really on fire. Callum Pate was hitting everything that moved in terms of tackling. Dan Nicholson was running with real power and purpose, and our wings were in great form. A really good outcome on Saturday. It was 10 tries, and I think if anyone had offered us that before the game, we'd have bitten their hand off. So very pleased. Definitely progress continuing, but this weekend we know that we are coming up against a really tough opponent. Biggar, at the start of the season, were struggling, but nobody was fooled by that. I think everyone knew that they would start to win once they got their team back into a settled formation and found a wee bit of confidence themselves. So going up to Hartree Mill will be a real challenge for us. However, it's a challenge that we can be excited about and look forward to. I think we're well equipped to take it on. We're completely realistic about the contest that lies before us. Biggar will be really strong in the forwards. They have some real bite there, and we will have to be on top of our game to even have parity. However, I think that there's lots of room for confidence. On Saturday past, we had guys like Liam Scott and Craig Keddy coming off the bench. So if we can introduce that kind of strength and depth into the game, then I think that we should be confident. If we can get that parity in the forwards, then I think that we have the backs to really take it to bigger. So with lots of confidence, we go up there, not particularly expecting anything fantastic, but certainly confident that a win is well within our scope. Confident about our ability to win, but also very respectful of what we'll be up against. So we're looking forward to it, and hopefully it will be a good game.
Gala looking for 5 on the bounce, of course, but a very different Biggar now, as we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, but Biggar have got their chests out now. They've hit a bit of a purple patch in the league campaign, and especially with a huge victory last weekend against Melrose, they're going to come into this with a lot of confidence. And again, the shackles are off them, because you feel that that little margin that they've been able to build over the last few weeks is really put a cushion between them and the likes of GHK at the bottom of the league. So back at Hartree Mill, they'll be a difficult team to turn over. But again, Gala, after a huge victory against GHK, they'll come into this with the confidence as well, because they're scoring points, they're building as a team. And I think I bumped into you and Robbie during the week as well, and I think that even just in a fleeting conversation where he was really struggling to pay for his fuel at a self-service pump, you could see he was starting to enjoy life at Gala. I was speaking to his brother as well. He actually works alongside us at the college, and he's saying the same thing. So it's not a coincidence that you and Robbie's liking life at Gala, and he's certainly changed the fortunes that Gala I've seen earlier on in the season. They've got a bit more confidence.
GHA versus Glasgow Accies in 6 against 3rd, the two best Glasgow teams going head to head, and GHA getting that amazing win last week at Highland.
Yeah, this is it's a really interesting game between these two sides, because the Glasgow Accies were going really, really well, and they've almost just fallen off these last few weeks, and especially against Watsonians last weekend at home, being defeated, and GHA now back at Braidholme. We'll go into this with a lot of confidence, but again, they've just had that up and down season where they've not been able to find that consistency. But you do wonder in a Glasgow derby if they're able to find it at home.
GHK against Highland, 10th against 2nd. Highland losing their last 2 matches, and GHK fighting for their lives.
Yeah, and I think this is probably one of those games that is harder to predict, because GHK have been really, really poor over the last few weeks. They've obviously picked up 2 victories. They've got a draw this season, but they've fallen off the cliff a little bit and suffered some really heavy defeats. But it'll be interesting to see what Highland's state of mind is, because we've always talked about them travelling away from home. So travelling to GHK, are they able to turn them over and pick up a valuable victory at the bottom of the league and put a bit of pressure back on Dundee?
And talking of Dundee, they're at Watsonians, 7th against 9th. Watsonians on form at the moment, looking to make it 3 in a row themselves.
Yeah, Watsonians have had an upturn in form as well, but there's certainly a gulf between these two sides. You do mention it's 7th versus 9th, but Watsonians have had probably some more notable victories than what Dundee have. So you would imagine, at Marr side, it's going to be difficult to turn over Watsonians. But Dundee are in the same position as GHK. I spoke about Biggar before in terms of being a little bit more comfortable. A couple of surprise results in that league this weekend can make things a little bit more tricky for Biggar. So, still a lot to play for at the bottom of the league.
Let's have a look at the National 2 then, and last weekend's results. Aberdeen Grammar 10, Falkirk 50, Berwick 28, Stirling County 15, Kirkcaldy 22, Gordonians 44, Newton Stewart 6, Lasswade 6, and Peebles 25, Stewart's Melville 23. Let's have a look at the National 2 table then. Lasswade in first place, having played a game more, 43 points for them. Second, Falkirk 42, third, Peebles 41. Gordonians in fourth place, 35. Newton Stewart have 35 as well in fifth place. And then a big drop to Stirling County in sixth, 21 points for them. Stewart's Melville up to seventh now, even though they were docked 3 points. They've got 17. Kirkcaldy in eighth with 15. Berwick off the bottom with ninth place, 13 points for them. And Aberdeen Grammar back at the bottom on 10 points. So the top three all won. Berwick winning at last, and Newton Stewart against Lasswade ended in a very low scoring draw.
Yeah, on to Peebles. They've got 9 bonus points so far this season. It's only one less than Falkirk, who sit above them. That is the difference between those two sides. And obviously they've got the same amount of bonus points as last week at the top. The difference between the two sides in second and third place is they've got a game in hand. And this weekend there could be a big reshuffle in the way that league is structured in National 2. But certainly at the bottom, it's another interesting league with Stuart's Melville, Kirkcaldy and Berwick just above Aberdeen Grammar, so they're shuffling places down there as well. But a huge confidence boost for Berwick last weekend to get that victory at home against one of their near rivals. Stirling County probably realistically are out of that equation to be in that relegation battle, but Stu Mel, Kirkcaldy, Berwick and Aberdeen Grammar, they all have a game in hand. So this weekend in National 2 is going to be huge. But just certainly a little note about that game, Newton Stewart versus Lastwade, 6 points all. I'm glad we weren't covering that game, because it would have been a bit of a damp squib. But again, it shows that these games are really tight, and Newton Stewart are certainly still in the hunt at the top of the division. And
interesting as well, because when Lastwade and Falkirk were playing, it was completely the opposite. It was 55-33. Yeah, it just does show, again, the results in National 2. Sometimes they can be high-scoring games. Kirkcaldy Gordonians last weekend was 22-44. But I did say beforehand, I think the weather was a little bit of a leveller. And when I watched the Peebles Newton Stewart game, a month or so ago, I'm not surprised that the weather and that pitch led to a 6-6 encounter. I certainly wasn't surprised when I seen that result come through. We're back to pitches again. Let's move on. This week, Falkirk will play Stuart's Melville. We can hear from head coach at Stu Mel. That's Alex Haggart.
Saturday was a really good performance from us. I think I mentioned it when we were on the podcast last time, and said it after the game to the boys as well. I think to me, Saturday was about regaining a bit of pride. We're a proud group. We love our club, and I think in all honesty, the game that we had against Peebles 10 weeks ago, we were well short of how good we actually could be. So I think from our perspective, it was just about going out and highlighting how good we can be, and I think we did that, and we got a huge amount of positivity, and we got a huge amount of positive praise from Peebles in return, which was nice. I think in terms of the game, it could have gone either way. Looking at it objectively, it was a 2-point game. I think it could have been 2 points to us, it could have been 2 points to them. We had chances to maybe to score. We had a lot of concerted pressure in their 22, but we didn't take. But at the same time, I think they probably look back and say something similar. So I think it was a really even game, and I think we played our part in that. Looking forward into this week, obviously playing Falkirk. Look, we're under no illusions as to how brutal this is going to be. We're going there. They've just stuck 50 on Grammar. They're a really, really good side. Stevie is an awesome coach, and I think he's had 4 or 5 years with them. And he's now, you can see the fruits of his labour really sort of coming through, and really looking forward to taking them on, really looking forward to visiting. They're a great team, great club, and they've been awesome, and they've been super helpful for us as well over the last few weeks. So yeah, just looking to take what we did on Saturday into them, look to win the kicking battle. Obviously they've got a sort of slight slope on the pitch, so play a lot of rugby in that half, kick down there, force pressure, and see what we can come away with. But like I say, we're under no illusions. This is a really good team. They're top 2 in the league, potentially, looking to go up and put pressure on up in that one. But at the same time, we played really well against Peebles. We put pressure on them, so we back our own game as well. And I think just a quick note from me, we had Jamie Kane playing for us, who was 17. He's not actually 18 until Saturday, who's off to Australia to enjoy a few months of travelling in rugby out there. So we wish him all the best, and he's done a phenomenal job for us. So he's left a bit of a hole, but we've got a couple of guys in the squad who can maybe pick up that mantle, which is nice.
Good to hear from Alex Haggart. And Jamie Kane, I certainly know one team who would love to see him go to Australia, and that is Berwick, because he totally destroyed Berwick on his own. A faultless kicking display, 17-year-old as well. Fantastic future that guy's got.
Yeah, obviously away to experience some new things, and that'll be a great experience for him. But hopefully he does return at some point, and we can watch him in the future, and it's surely a name to keep an eye out for. But in terms of Stuart's Melville, they've played well in patches, and I think we'll probably come on to speak about Peebles shortly. But I do know in that game they had opportunities, and they potentially could have sprung a bit of a surprise, because Peebles, as we've mentioned before, they really need to make the Giants a bit of a fortress if they want to get out of this division. And even Ian Chisholm is hoping that they get out of National 2 into National 1, obviously for his connections that he had last year. But that was almost one of the games that could have completely undone their whole season this year. But Stuart Melville, just in terms of the way that they've been this season, just not able to get those box office moments and get those opportunities that they were looking for to get that win.
Very interesting one here. Gordonians against Newton Stewart, 4th against 5th. Gordonians on 35 points, Newton Stewart on 35 points. Newton Stewart, of course, unbeaten in 8 games. Okay, they got a draw at home to Lasswade, but that's going to be very, very interesting. And you would think as well, Gordonians have to get a result here because they've fallen off the pace a wee bit.
Yeah, I think they do. I think them and Newton Stewart are almost in the same position, that they need to go the rest of the season and not be defeated. And obviously going into this weekend, something's got to give between these two sides. And Gordonians at home have performed well since their defeat in the opening game of the season, but then have went on and obviously been beaten a couple of times further. One of them against Peebles as well, when they went on the road up there. That was almost a game that they probably could have and should have won as well. So they've not been able to. Peebles are in a good position. Gordonians and Newton Stewart hot on their tail, but one of them are probably going to fall away this weekend.
Another very close, hard to predict match as well down below. 8th against 9th, Kirkcaldy at home to Berwick. And let's hear from Berwick's forwards coach Paul Pringle.
So it's quite nice this week to do this report on the back of what was our first win of the season at home to Stirling County, where we won with 4 tries and won 28-15, so that's getting a 5-pointer and managing to lift ourselves off the bottom of the league. It was a tough match. Stirling was very strong, big in the carry. But yeah, the lads brought everything that we've been working on to the fore and just really got that result. Second half was pretty nervy, as you would expect from a team that hasn't had a win all season. So we were glad to get that over the line. Some really good performances from guys that come in. So Jason Gerwood came in at prop. Lee Douglas, the evergreen 38-year-old, came off the bench at half-time in the back row and was brilliant for the second half. So it's good to have him back involved. And then a real return to form for Aidan Rosie. He scored one, set one up, and was just really dangerous at all points in the game. So brilliant to have him firing back on all cylinders. On a side note, really good to see Stirling County had a 17-year-old prop come off the bench and really hold his own. We always wonder about the future players and the future of rugby, especially around front row players who are kind of like hen's teeth getting. So to see a lad at that age come off the bench in a National 2 game and more than hold his own was really encouraging. I think that's credit to him and Stirling County. In terms of this week, though, we move forward. We've got Kirkcaldy away. We know this will be a really tough match. We've got a couple of injuries, so Saturday was expensive for us in the fact that Cam Rogerson, our scrum half's out for what's likely to be about 2 months with a bad injury at his back. Club captain Ali Grieve had a head knock, so he's likely to be 3 weeks, I think is the protocol, so we'll lose him. But we have a couple of guys coming back in who'll fill those spaces, and apart from that, we're largely unchanged. So we're looking forward to the match. Kirkcaldy are effectively the next target for us. Now we're off the bottom. They're the next team, just a couple of points ahead of us. So we really want to come into this and, try and get a victory up there. But we know it'll not be easy. They've had good results against Aberdeen and Stoneyhill this season, so we're not taking anything for granted. But we've had a hard week in training. Boys have built up again, and we just want to get on the road on Saturday and see what we can do and hopefully come back with another win.
Paul Pringle, this certainly could be tight, and you can certainly hear the relief in his voice there.
Yeah, it's almost palpable, and it's obviously great that they got off the kind of knot that they had. They were obviously sitting there on bagel with no victories so far this campaign. So it's a huge victory for Berwick, and I don't think that can be underestimated, because it was one of those vital games that at the end of the campaign they could look back on and say that game against Stirling was the kind of the catalyst for the rest of their season to survive in this division. And from Berwick's point of view, obviously they've they've found themselves in this division after the reshuffle, after a last gasp victory last day of the season at Preston Lodge. So, they've had to do it the hard way, and they're digging in again and trying to, stay in this division, and that then allows you to then grow and build year on year. And it was great to hear Paul Pringle as well speak about, the other team in terms of bringing a young player onto the pitch and bring them into the senior environment. So, that's what the club game's all about. But Berwick want to be probably seeing that player next season, and to do that, they need to be targeting teams like Kirkcaldy.
And their mates in the borders, Peebles can certainly do them a favour, because Peebles are at home to Aberdeen Grammar. Peebles need 5 points to help themselves, and as I say, that would certainly help Berwick as well. Here's head coach of Peebles, Graham Patterson.
So reflecting on last weekend's game against Stuart Melville, the overriding thing for me was it was two different teams. Stuart Melville certainly were more physical, seemed to be more organised, and probably have just grown into the league from when that first game back in September, and we played them up at Inverleith. And for us, we were just a bit off. We were just about 5% off on everything that we tried to do. So it was a real challenge for us. It was a home game. On paper, we were expected to win, but it didn't just quite pan out like that. So in reflection, it's a good thing. I think we've had that kind of stern test from a good side, a good organised, combative side, both physically and tactically. It's a good test for us to have at this stage of the season. I think we've shown glimpses of what we can do, particularly the strike move try in the first half, and Donald Anderson off a move executed perfectly, but then there was probably 5 or 6 clips I sent out to the players, showed real good opportunities to score tries that we didn't convert. So you take those into consideration and you say, yes, we could have won easier, but Stuart Melville were there to put us under a great deal of pressure and try and win the game, which they clearly nearly did themselves. So disappointed with the performance, but pleased with the result as you would be with a win. We didn't get the bonus point, which leaves us 1 point behind Falkirk, and we still have that, both ourselves and Falkirk have that game in hand over Last Wade, which will play out this weekend. Message that's going out to the players for this weekend is we prepare and approach the game as if we're playing somebody at the top and not somebody at the bottom of the league. So it's very much about going about your business as it should be, and not adjusting according to the opposition league position or perceived level of competence. So we need to go out there and we need to put in a good performance as a team, not as individuals. And that was a difference from last Saturday. We probably didn't gel as well as a team, and that's what I'm looking for, a reaction from the players that are going to be playing on Saturday, is they really play as a team, and that performance element will then reflect on the result and the outcome of the game. Now Aberdeen will be dangerous, as every week they're just looking to get some sort of step up in their fight for survival, so we've got to be wary of that. They will probably come out the traps looking to get some sort of foothold in the game, and if it means soaking up that pressure, that's what we have to do. Soaking up that pressure, applying our own pressure to them, and then hoping that breaking point comes fairly quickly in the game, and we get a good performance, which will lead to a good result. Squad wise, we're fairly settled, certainly in the backs. It's looking like an unchanged back line at this stage of the week, which is key, keeping that continuity, building relationships and positions, and looking to develop our game week on week. A bit of rejigging the forwards with a few unavailabilities. Obviously this is a rescheduled game, and a couple of guys are unavailable due to this. Neil Hogarth got taken off injured last week, so he's unavailable due to the injury, but we're replacing one old stalwart with another, and Willie Aitken will start up front. Matty Carrier's unavailable this week, so it gives opportunities for Rory Smith and Lewis Copeland and John Napier to step into that mantle and take on that role. And pleasingly, we've got club captain Murdo Anderson back available after his injury over the last 6 weeks. unfortunately for the team, it's a replacement for somebody who's also unavailable, and Finlay Collins will be away. But Murdo will fill that gap and come straight back in to lead the team. So we're looking forward to getting back on the performance horse and delivering a really good display of overall rugby is what we're looking for. So good attack, good defence, good decision making tactically, and hopefully a good result at the end of the day.
Peebles versus Aberdeen at Grammar taking place at the Geigs. That's a 3 o'clock kick-off. By the way, the Kirkcaldy-Berwick match is also 3 o'clock. All the others are 2 o'clock. No match for Stirling County this week, but we still want to hear from Craig Deakins, head coach, following their loss at Scremerston last week.
It was obviously a tough game for us down in Scremerston Saturday down at Berwick. Obviously the boys were well primed. We had them told, what to expect. Berwick were fighting for their lives. They're looking to pick up the first win of the season, especially at home. All the results have been really close this year, and Berwick didn't shock us by any means in the first 40 minutes when they came out the blocks, all firing. To give them credit, they capitalised and they took advantage of all our really poor tackling and some of our unforced errors and turnover ball just wasn't really good enough. And to be fair, they put us to the sword and went in at half time deservedly up 28 points to 10. Our boys showed some really good character. We had a good chat at half time, and they came out in the second half and they could quite easily just turn around and said, the game's done, doesn't really matter. But they went out there and they actually fought for 40 minutes. They actually put on a show that I would have expected in the first 40 minutes, and if we had it in the first 40 minutes, it might have been a different story, the scoreline. But the game finished 28 points to 15, so fair enough, it was maybe good to win the second half, but ultimately, we got beat 28-15 against a team which, they wanted it more in the first 40 minutes, and so I'm saying to our players now, we need to be putting this together for 80 minutes, especially against these teams. It doesn't matter if you're top of the table or the bottom of the table in this league. Every team can go out there and put in a performance and actually come away with the spoils. So our first 15, we don't have a game this weekend. It's a free weekend, so it's quite a deserved break for some of our guys, because quite a few of them have been, putting in performances week in, week out. So we're a bit of a quieter week with some of these guys. However, the focus obviously turns to the second 15. They're actually playing Musselburgh away this weekend. Obviously, our second 15, they're off the back of 2 really good wins. They beat Currie, who were undefeated, a couple of weeks ago at Bridge Hall, which was a massive confidence boost for the boys. But it's good to see actually, all the hard work that these boys are putting in, playing against a Premiership outfit, they came away with a good win. Beat Bigger again the weekend, so that's them done the double over Bigger this year. And I say they're going in this weekend to play Musselburgh away, so we're hoping it'll be 3 from 3.
Craig Deakins, good to hear from him. Well, there's no National 3 this weekend, it's a standby week, but results from last week: Allen Glens 44, Hamilton 22, Cartha Queen's Park 30, Boroughmuir 36. Now here's one: Dumfries 47, Hillhead Jordan Hill 15. We'll come back to that one in a minute. Howarfife 19, Orkney 24. Huge result for Orkney there. And West of Scotland 6, Preston Lodge 28. Lots to talk about. Let's talk about the fact that Dumfries can lose by nearly 90 points 2 weeks running and then come back and beat a team much higher in the league by 47 points to 15. How can that possibly be?
They scored more tries, got more conversions. Yeah, it just sometimes that just happens in rugby, especially the further down the pyramid you go. You just don't know. There could be a stag do, there could be an event on, which means that
must be a hell of a stag do then.
Yeah, maybe it was one of the popular players. But I don't know too much about the context of that victory.
But it's what I was saying with Ian Chisholm earlier on, that sometimes you see up and down results, and you if you just look at it as a black and white result, it doesn't make sense. But there's always a story behind it.
Yeah, I know, and it's difficult to keep a grasp on 50 games of rugby, at the weekend to know everything about it. But obviously it was a surprise victory because Dumfries haven't been as consistent and great this season. But at home to get a sizable victory, give them a lot of confidence, especially against a team who's above them. So it doesn't really matter. Whatever the manner of victory that they've been able to get, they've been able to pick up a victory, and that's it. They'll be going to the next game a lot more confident.
What about Howarfife 19, Orkney 24? Orkney remain unbeaten, and that was a tough one to go to Duffus Park.
Yeah, do you know what? It was great because there was an account on X, which was Twitter, which actually highlighted the fact that the game was actually being live streamed. So, but when I was doing a little bit of prep before the Jed Selkirk game, I was able to actually watch little bits of the game, and horrific conditions. It was really attritional, but it was so good to just be able to watch little glimpses of that game. And there was even updates coming through that Howe Fife had scored and taken the lead. When I tuned back in, Orkney were back in front, and in terms of the whole game itself, we did speak about Orkney having to get over early for a 12 o'clock kickoff. Now that is a huge ask for that team to come across and still put in a performance against a team who was snuggling in beside them in the league table. So slowly but surely I'm almost becoming an Orkney fan. I just do want to see them go up. The thing that's going to be difficult against them is PL are in brilliant form at the moment. That game between those two sides is going to be really important as to who's going to get out of that division, because Preston Lodge week on week are getting stronger and stronger, but Orkney, their commitment, their consistency, where they are in the league table is an incredible story.
Well, that's happening December the 2nd, and Sam Matthews is going to go down to Pennypit for that one and cover that one for us. It's a busy day that day. We'll come to that more, obviously, on next week's programme. But, you say you're a fan of Orkney. Isn't there a big Peebles-Orkney connection?
Yeah, I've probably got a couple of brothers and sisters up in Orkney. There is a big Peebles connection because I used to tour there a lot. I went up and I'm actually an Orkney Sevens winner, believe it or not. After my playing days as well, I was a late replacement for a stag do, so that was disappointing in itself to be a late replacement. However, there's a good connection with people. A lot of the older committee members and volunteers have got really good connections with that club, and it was always a trip that the players looked forward to towards the end of the year to go up to Orkney. I think it was the first weekend in May. They go up and had a great time up there. Like the Orcadian hospitality is brilliant. I've been up there a couple of times up to Orkney, and the social environment that they provide, how welcoming they are, it is a brilliant place, and it's a lovely place to go as well. It's such a really nice island to visit. But in terms of rugby, there's been a few players come to the mainland. The name off the top of my head is completely evaded me, but he played for Watsonians and then was a Melrose Sevens when he was the first Orcadian to win Melrose Sevens. Somebody Thompson, and he was playing for Watsonians the year that they won Melrose Sevens, and a lot of talented rugby players have come out of that club, and it's great to see them being able to retain such a huge amount of talent to fight on at the top of the National 3 this season.
Of course, they've been down to the Peebles Sevens a couple of times as well. We've seen them down there. So the National 3 table then, Preston Lodge at the top, 49 points, but played 11. Orkney in second, unbeaten, 10 out of 10, 47 points in second place. Allen Glens in third, 41 for them. Howe Fife in fourth, 39. Boroughmuir fifth, 34. Hillhead Jordan Hill dropped to sixth, 32 points for them. Dumfries in 7th position with 17. West of Scotland are on 15. Cartha Queen's Park 14. And Hamilton still without a win in 11 attempts with 9 points, 5 try bonuses and 4 losing bonuses. And they all came in the earlier part of the season. Lately, I'm afraid they're falling off the wagon a wee bit. But that's the league table in National 3. National 4, the results from last week. Garnock 20, Whitecraigs 3. Greenock Wanderers 18, Strathmore 25, Murrayfield Wanderers 22, Dunfermline 26, North Berwick 28, Ross High 19 and Stuartry 52, Perthshire 8. That means the league table in National 3 at the moment has Garnock at the top. They're unbeaten, 10 out of 10, but crucially they didn't get the try bonus for the first time this season. 20 points to 3 against Whitecraigs. I think they got 3 tries but didn't quite get the fourth one. But my goodness, 363 points difference, 9 try bonuses out of the 10, 49 points out of a possible 50. Garnock well on their way to promotion to National 3. Strathmore in second, 36. Whitecraigs in third, 36. Then North Berwick, who were docked 3 points but still have 31. Stuartry 30, Dunfermline 26, Greenock Wanderers 20, Murrayfield Wanderers 20, Perthshire 16 and Ross High 11 at the bottom. So Garnock again winning there against the second place Whitecraigs, as was then. Now they've dropped to third.
I think I mentioned on Whitecraigs as well. I think that was the first game that they've not picked up a try bonus this season as well. So obviously two teams that have been relatively high scoring all campaign have locked horns and have kind of cancelled each other out, and I think again a lot of that comes down to the weather that we had last weekend. It wasn't the best conditions for open running rugby, but Garnock again just being able to squeeze out that victory, 20 points to 3, never really in any danger and they've got, you would say, they're almost in the same position as Ayr are in National 1. They're going to be really difficult to catch at the top.
It is impressive from White Craigs because they've actually lost 4 of their 10 games, but they've had 9 try bonuses, as you said, but also 3 losing bonuses. So 12 bonus points in all this season. That's certainly helped them get that lofty position of 3rd place. Well, this week there's 3 games in National 4. Garnock against North Berwick, Strathmore versus Perthshire, and White Craigs against Dunfermline. But that's about all we can squeeze into the podcast for today on the Scottish Club Rugby podcast. Thanks much indeed for your support as always. Don't forget Rugby Radio on Saturday will be coming from Millbrae in Ayrshire for the National 1 game between Ayr and Melrose. Can Ayr make it 12 out of 12? We're going to have live commentary on that one with Dale Clancy and Robin Purdy in the commentary box. We start at 1:30. We'll be on air for 3.5 hours with score updates throughout the afternoon and a lot of chat from the Ayr Rugby Club as well. There'll be television highlights on Borders Rugby TV of that game, and also Selkirk versus Marr. And check out our website at rugbyradio.co.uk, all the information that you need on the 50 clubs playing national rugby in Scotland this season. If you want to get in touch, as usual, it's podcast at bordersrugby.net. But from Dale Clancy and myself, bye for now.